So morning everybody and welcome to Recession Rebellion. For those of you who are watching on the catch up, as indeed many of you seem to be doing these days, welcome to you as well. This is a very bittersweet day today actually on Recession Rebellion because it is the last time that we are joined by the inimitable Mr. Martin Lucas. It's the last of his Thursday sessions, and as I said to you Tuesday, Recession Rebellion will be going weekly from June onwards. There will be longer sessions, they will be pre-registered sessions, and they will be starting weekly on Thursday the 11th of June. So you might want to mark that in your diary. That will be the next session after today. Is going to be on Thursday the 11th of June. It'll be in the morning on that particular day. So we'll be publishing more details on that next week. But yes, as I say, this is the last time Martin is joining us today, as he said on Tuesday. Quite brilliant actually, and relevantly to this morning. They're so busy over the Gap in the Matrix at the moment that it's necessary for them to stand back from this because simply do not have the time to do it to the standard that they want. That's what Martin was saying to us on Tuesday. So I think what that tees up is quite brilliantly what we're going to talk about today, which is a sort of live clinic about questions on sales and marketing. So Martin is somebody who, as far as I can see it, has not really been struggling with sales and marketing at all during the coronavirus crisis, and actually has been, to give it the technical term, smashing it. So over the next 20, 25 minutes, I think it's a really good opportunity to explore why that is, perhaps, and to get hints and tips from Martin. So as we go through this morning, if you want to drop any questions into the chat, mark them for my attention. I will fire them at Martin in the fashion of a malfunctioning tennis ball training machine over the course of the next 25 minutes, and we'll see where we go. Good morning, Martin.
Thank you, Phil. That was a great intro. You're on fire with the different analogies today. The tennis ball one is definitely up there in the top three of Recession Rebellion analogies. So I'm ready to start batting off the tennis balls or whatever would be a better, more intellectual response to that. So what do you want to start with? What's your favourite question so far?
I would say my favourite question so far, and the one I want to start with today is, and this hasn't just come up on this webinar actually, it's come up in a load of other situations that we've been involved with as well. We're still seeing a huge amount of inertia out there in the world in terms of businesses wanting to get into strategic planning and businesses, making good decisions about how to move forward from where they are at the moment. So the simple question that comes off that is, how do you convince people, or can you convince people, and if so, how do you convince people that now is actually the time to act?
It's a great question. So let me start with the analysis side of it, right? So we've spoken very heavily on Recession Rebellion, heavily meaning number of times, not in a heavy sense, about what inertia actually is. And I've mentioned it a few times, but anybody listening to this, watching this, have a look on the YouTube channel. Phil did an amazing session about what inertia actually looks like. And one of the things that I've done on the podcast that I do with my colleague Noel is about, is systemic change going to happen because of COVID, right? And we're actually coming into the final quarter, or the final stage of acceptance, right? Which is days 75 to days 90. So I've spoken before about psychologists call it a grieving period, right? And what you're starting to see is, I'm getting a lot of this from, we work with marketing agencies as well as direct to brand. And there's a lot of agencies that are starting to see green shoots shooting up. Just battered my laptop doing that. They're starting to see green shoots arriving over this period, and that's only going to increase as you come out of day 90. Certainly day 90, which is going to be the 12th of June. Moving forward through the rest of the summer, you're going to see more acceptance and less of the inertia happening. So analytically, that's going to be a general change to society. Just go over the question one more time, Phil, because I wanted to cover the creative part of it as well.
No, it's fine. So how do you convince people that now is the time to act?
Right. So the analysis stuff means that there's going to be a bit more acceptance, right? In terms of the now is the time to act, I'll take you through the journey that I've personally been on, because I think there's a lot of validity to it. On the 13th of March, I decided that the next 3 days, which took me into a weekend, was going to be about looking at what my value proposition is, And after all those years of work, I wasn't going to let a crisis stop me. So the first thing that you need to look at how to convince people is, do you believe in what you're actually telling them to believe in? It's one of those kind of haikus of self, right? Is that 70% of what we communicate is non-verbal, right? So I spent a number of days looking at what's my value proposition and how does it play into the crisis? Not taking advantage of the crisis, but much more about what's going to be going on inside people's minds. So in that initial period, it was about revenue protection. And that's what really helped accelerate our growth, because we were talking about how customers think, the conditions that they're in, and all the things that are associated with that, right? And then that's what we've been doing over time, and that's helped accelerate our growth. But now we're just going back to our normal business as usual methodology. We were just on a call, we're recording this on a Thursday morning, we're just on a call, myself and Paul, one of my colleagues, with an agency in Australia. And they were, again, giving us more and more of those green shoots. They were very excited about working with us. They were throwing customers at us. They were throwing examples at us. And the reason why they were doing that is that we're very clearly showing them and telling them that what we can do is make a difference to how they sell. So it's a USP, so that they can sell more, deliver better, grow performance. And that's obviously a huge thing about how you want to convince people. So the thing that I'm always looking is that it's not just that my business is about sales and marketing growth. Everybody's business in a capitalist sense is about improving something for an organization. And I think that we forget that. So I would encourage all of you to have a look at what is it that you're positively changing for a business, for your customers, for your clients, for them as individuals. So there's a big difference between a buyer's mindset and a business mindset. And often we focus too much on the business, whereas the buyer's needs to be taken into account as well, because that's the core emotional decision. But my point is, have a look at actually the benefits that you bring to people, and then have a look at how your go-to-market strategy represents that, because the vast majority of business I deal with, they do not represent the actual value and offering that they bring. It's like the thing that I joke about is that we make an assumption that the people that we serve know how to do their job, meaning that they know that if you can get systemic growth, if you can do operational change, if you can systemically change a business, if you can change its design, whatever it is that your business does, don't assume that people know what they know how to do their job, or that you know how to do your job. So you need to put numbers at the front of what you do and statistical evidence, because otherwise you're just causing your own problems. And it's a human condition, right? We make assumptions. And if we make assumptions, then we don't like repeating ourselves. And if we don't repeat ourselves, then it's making the assumption that customer 1 knows the same as customer 50, and they don't. So that was kind of a long, waffly answer to your question, Phil. Does that help?
It does, and I think there are a few questions that sort of come off that. Another question's come in. What is the single most effective sales hack you're recommending right now?
The one that I've recommended for the past 15 years doesn't change. The best sales hack is not to think of sales as sales. If you do, then you're into the mindset of thinking that you're a second-hand car salesperson in your mind, and you're causing negative problems, right? Sales. So a friend of mine, when I had a real job, to use my mum's language, so I had a big business unit that I looked after for British Telecom, and I called my friend one day, and he said, "You sound frustrated." And I said, "Yeah, I just can't find good salespeople." And he said, "Well, the problem is, Marty, that there's far too many sales jobs and not enough sales people." And here's what he meant by it, because it was a great thing for me, is that sales is about free thinking. It's about being able to think in your customer's shoes and understanding their perspective, and therefore solving problems, but solving problems how they see it. That's what sales is. If you think about sales as a scary thing, about asking for money and all those types of things, then it'll just manifest that in your content, in your lead generation, in your behavior. Again, it comes back to belief. If you understand yourself, your value proposition, what you offer people, then all you can do is go out to the market, show the difference that you make, and you will attract people that want it. Don't worry about the people that don't want it, because all you've just done is a great job of qualifying out what Phil and I joke about as bad money, is that not every customer is a good customer. And I know that that sounds difficult when we're going through COVID and money is up and down for lots of different people, but bad money is never going to be a route to happiness for you.
I think that's so true. I think there's always such a correlation between the clients you enjoy working with, the values alignment that those clients demonstrate with you, and the profitability of those clients. It's like you'll never make like bad money. You may see turnover coming through those clients, but you will rarely see a profitable bad client, I think is the truth of it, isn't it? So
yeah. You're not going to marry somebody you don't like. So why do you get in bed with customers you don't want to? It just doesn't make any sense. It's just a route to unhappiness, and it means that your decision making is based on money and only money. And if you do that, you're going to make yourself sadder and more unhappy, and it's going to cost yourself money, ironically, in the future anyway. So you've got to be true to what your instinct is, which again comes back to self-belief, because too many people don't trust their instinct because they don't understand that it's actually your instinct is the output of hundreds of different calculations. You just get the answer of the sum. And we don't trust our instinct enough, and it causes too many problems for people, I think.
I know quite a few people, Martin, who've married people they don't like, or at least as a result of coronavirus are living with people that they no longer like. But I think that's a subject for a separate webinar, probably not one that has sales and marketing as its focus. Anyway, next one, talking of sales and marketing. Another question. What is the role of marketing in the era of coronavirus? What I think this question talks to is, I suspect what's going on, is that for the questioner, they're wondering about, are the features and benefits, or the way that I've talked about my business, or even the fact that I'm using my marketing to try and sell products to consumers, maybe feels a little bit tin-eared in the era of coronavirus, or maybe feels like it's somehow not meeting the marks. That's what I think is going on under this question. So what is the role of marketing as you would perceive it, Martin, in the sort of coronavirus?
So the biggest thing for me is the strategic thinking that's underpinning the marketing. That's where people need to take a moment and look at what they're actually doing, because business as usual is not going to work, right? So if you just go out and you're doing exactly the same things, it's not going to work as it did before the COVID stuff, right? Because you end up in a situation where there's a lot of brands right now that are using lots of baseline negative psychology, and they're trying to do business as usual activity, ignoring actually what's going on, right? So the strategic thinking is missing their customer's perspective, right? So the first thing about it is that you have to take time, literally take time, to do some strategic thinking about what your business is, how to go to market, how to think about your business, your vision, your values, basically all the things that corporate punk can help you with. So, I'm just doing a bit of lead generation for you, Phil. Really. So there's definitely the strategy of what you're doing. The next thing is the massive bias from me, right? But there's a good logic to it, which is the emotional side, right? Is if you can't think from your customer's perspective, then you don't understand the emotional context of the problem that you're solving for them, right? So whether you're selling toothpicks or cotton buds or £1,000 jackets or whatever it happens to be in that consumer scale, right, is that the human brain has got a reward system within it. So every purchase that we make, not when we get the physical product, but thinking about the purchase, the moment of purchase, there's a chemical release within the brain because it's a reward system. And that's how everything operates. That's how 95% of all of our decisions are based on emotions, right? So emotional context, then we get the reward from it, which is a chemical release within the brain, right? So if you account for that emotional context and you've got the right strategic thinking, which accounts for the now, then that's your combination so that you can start marketing in a way that takes into account who you are, what you are, and why you are. And then the David Ogilvy stuff, right? Every marketeer should know how to sell. There's nothing wrong with sales. I come across far too many marketing people that don't know how to sell. And if you don't know how to sell, then what's the point of what you're actually doing? Because we're in a capitalist world, so it needs to point to that direction. And that final point is probably a little bit too aggressive of me being me, but it's still, for the purposes of the last Recession Rebellion, I want to be as direct as possible, because that's where I see a lot of marketeers causing their own problems.
So talking about problems, questions come in from left field actually, but I think it would be interesting to get your take on it, Martin, in this sort of, as I say, malfunctioning tennis ball approach to fielding questions. Not my best metaphor of the week, by the way. My best metaphor of the week was in a podcast that just went live yesterday, where I was interviewed by somebody, and I said, they were talking about something. I said, just because you sleep in a garage overnight doesn't make you a car, which I thought was a good one. Anyway, enough. Much has been said, the questioner here, about younger people struggling with lockdown anxiety and isolation. what special measures do employers need to think about, as the return to work will still most likely not be a return to pre-virus practices? So thought I'd just lob this one at you, Martin, just to keep you on your toes.
Yes.
So what special measures do employers need to think about, as return to work will not likely be a return to pre-virus practices? And actually, I would agree with that. Just to say before you dive in, I think I was in a lot of different board meetings yesterday. It was quite an intense day. And it was so clear through those conversations that, yes, younger people in a lot of businesses are struggling with that kind of lack of social contact. I mean, anybody that thinks they can shift to a wholly remote way of working, I think that's really questionable based on some of the discussions that we're taking part in at the moment. But actually also that some of the measures now that different co-working spaces and shared office spaces and whatever are bringing in to try and manage spread of the virus. I mean, I won't get into my particular view on some of those measures, but are actually going to be a massive inhibitor, not only to sort of meaningful social contact, but actually to whether the businesses in question want to go back into those environments at all in the short term. So even though return to work may be happening in June or July, actually for some businesses, they're talking about it may be 6 to 12 months before they're willing to go back into their offices, simply because the way that those offices are configured is so counter to how those businesses want to run or need to run. Anyway, Martin, your thoughts on that?
Yeah, no, it's a good one. I mean, I'll go into the generational and the kind of age stuff. But first of all, I wanted to just look at the overarching challenge, right? Is that what COVID's going to present as we come out of it, right? Whether there's a second wave or not, is we can't have a world run by health and safety rules, right? So I'm not saying that people don't need to stay safe. What I'm saying is that we're going to have these rules, but most health and safety execution. I read a great story, and a friend was telling me about an experience they had with Best Buy in the United States, where they wanted to go and check out a piece of kit to buy. So it's mainly an electronics store at Best Buy, right? And you had to make an appointment, and when you made the appointment, they were treated like they were dirt. Like, it was a horrible, horrible, one of the worst customer experiences you could imagine. They were told they couldn't wander around the store. They were told that they had to stand still, that they would bring individual products to them rather than being actually looked at. And I'm not having to go at Best Buy for the sake of it, right? It's a great example where Best Buy ended up apologizing because at HQ, what they said was that the people in the store had misinterpreted the rules, right? But think about how most people operate within rules, particularly in a job scenario, is that we have a lot of practical nuances inside our minds, so we follow the rules with it. And health and safety, by notion of what it is about keeping people safe, and it's very functional and it lacks emotion, right? So the first thing that we're going to run into is a lot of negative stuff where literally people are going to be scared of other people, right? Colleagues, interactions, how we do things. So we're actually going to see a lot of businesses are going to generate even more anxiety and even more stress than what they're currently doing, because they're going to execute it really poorly. I was on a call, I think on Tuesday, with a large corporation, and they said, we're just about going to officially launch working from home. And I was like, it's coming up on 75 days. What have you been doing? And they said, well, most people have been really struggling with it because haven't had the rules in place. And I was like, it's amazing how individuals get conditioned, right? Like, how difficult is it to join a Zoom call or join a Skype call and stuff? And yet people have been resisting it and holding it back. So I find that type of stuff quite amusing in a kind of ironic way. So there's definitely a risk of how businesses understand the emotional intelligence of health and safety and the rules that they put out to people. And then that links actually back into the question, right? I don't believe in this concept that this way that whenever we look at a generational impact, what you often hear is, oh, this is affecting young people, or young people don't understand this, or young people don't know what they've got, right? I heard that when I was a kid. I hear the same things that we say about kids, but there is cause and effect for people under the age of 20, because that's the first completely digital age that we've ever had, right? So what we've been talking about in the past decade is that we're raising people that have got lower social skills when it comes to human, right? But look at 2020 during COVID, they've actually got higher coping mechanisms because they're already digitally savvy in every way. So they're used to interacting with people in that social context. So I actually think that depending on the rules of businesses and how they deploy it, like my wife's business have already implemented a travel policy that says, we realized, they were just super honest, they said, we realised that we've been spending too much money on travel, asking you to do too much travel. So then now this new policy is actually going to be about lessening travel, which made my wife super happy because there's times where she gets too stressed and she was traveling too much, right? So my point about it is that emotional intelligence matters, mental health matters, and there's still barriers in the world. And there were barriers before COVID, right? I'm hoping that COVID, after 90 days, starts to accelerate people's understanding. But the vast majority of, particularly the larger the business, they're going to do a worse job with this. The smaller the business, they're going to do a better job because it's just the nature of conditioned behaviors. And the larger the corporation, the more functional they become, the more functional and practical you are, the more health and safety you are, the less you account for people's emotions. So anxiety and stress is going to rise no matter what the age of the people you're dealing with, the larger the business, in my opinion. And that's not a hard and fast rule. Some people are better at the lower end of businesses, some people are better at the higher end. But to generalize a little bit, that's how I would answer that question.
So great. And one last question then, which I suppose is a question from me really, which is, we've been together doing these Recession Rebellion webinars now for nearly 3 months. And this is knocking on the door of webinar number 30, which sort of blows my mind actually. It's quite a chunk of work, I guess, we've done together. And I'm interested to understand in your mind, and all the ground that we've covered together in the last 10 weeks, what is the number one recommendation or the number one takeout that you would say to the Recession Rebellion audience? If there's one thing that you take out from the last 30 webinars, as far as you, Martin, are concerned, what would it be, or what should it be?
It's a great question. I'll take you back to why I enjoy working with Full Stop, right? So we've got different businesses that serve different sides of organizations, right? But the core thing, the reason why I think that we flow really well together and get on in a business and personal context, right, is that it's about people, right? And in a digital world and in a COVID-generated world, we've got two issues going on when it comes to people. Is that COVID makes us feel that we've got less time, right? The Zoom fatigue that we're speaking about last week, the leadership, the vision, the values, the stuff that Phil's spoken about, right? We feel like we've got less and less time, so we rush. The digital world was already putting us into a context of rushing, so it's almost like we're doubling down on that. When we rush, what happens is that humans use the tools at hand, right? So we use the tools at hand, so we'd be busy, we join extra calls, we're doing lots of emails, we're doing lots of WhatsApp, we're messaging people, things like that. What we're not doing, and this is a key thing about mindset, is pausing to think about what we're doing, what we're saying to other people. We're just rushing. The brain wants to automate as much as possible. So the risk that we've got is that we're going to keep doubling down on it and not accounting for people. So if you look at, you could just randomize this, right, and watch any of those 30 videos that Phil's has spoken about, and you'll see a consistent thread. It's about how people think and how to treat them. Inside your organization, outside your organization, how you build, how you grow. It comes back to the same thing. The emotional context, people, their feelings, how you treat them, no matter who they are, employees, suppliers, customers, it all comes back to the same thing. If you don't account for the individual that you're dealing with, then you're setting yourselves up to lose, because that's where you just lose the personalization, the emotion of it. So that would be my core takeaway, I think.
Brilliant. And I think probably the right note for us to end today on, there's a couple of questions we weren't able to get to given the time. If that's the case, you can email Martin. You've all got his email address, I believe. If not, Martin, it's your email address?
Martin@gapinthematrix.com.
Great. So you can email Martin and ask him any further questions that you would like, and he will get to it. By all accounts, about 3 or 4 months, given how run off his feet the Matrix team are at the moment. And Martin, I'm sure on behalf of the entire Recession Rebellion audience, the many hundreds of people who've watched these webinars over the last 10 weeks, thank you, a huge thank you for your generosity of time and expertise, and the way that you've wanted not only to give of your own expertise in terms of the Thursday sessions, but also help curate this entire series, and also be master of ceremonies on many occasions in a way that I have personally really enjoyed and benefited from. And for me as well, when we started work on this, I mean, this all came together, as some of you will know, incredibly quickly. We decided to do it, and it was a bit like Martin and I had a phone call, I think about 1 or 2 days after lockdown began, and said, right, we need to do something. What's it going to be? And I can't think of anybody else who I rather would have sort of embarked on this particular journey with, and who I think would have brought the value that Martin has brought. So a huge thank you from me. You'll be missed hugely. For the rest of you, as I say, those who want to continue to tune in, keep your eyes peeled. There'll be a bulletin coming out from Corporate Punk next week. That will be, if you're not signed up, sign up at corporatepunk.com/bulletin. That will give you details of our Recession Rebellion webinar series for June. The first date for that will be the 11th of June. I think it's 11 o'clock in the morning, but don't quote me on that. We'll confirm all that next week, and you'll be able to pre-register for what is going to be quite a radically different series of webinars that we're running from June onwards. In the meantime, have a good rest of your day. That is the end of week 10 of Recession Rebellion. Good Lord. And Martin, thank you again.
Thanks, Phil. It's been a pleasure.